Hey there everybody, it's AJ of the Mighty Gluestick. Nice to see ya. I've had a little bit of feedback, so there won't be any background music in this video because apparently I'm quite hard to understand with my thick accent. Although it's really not very thick, an accent for a Kiwi. I sound quite posh for a Kiwi. Um, you might encounter accents of Kiwis that sound a little bit like this, bro, where you won't be able to understand a thing they say. Yeah, so count yourself lucky. Now, so this video is going to be a little bit different. It's on the subject of monsters and building encounters and things, and it's just imparting a little bit of lore. I've written a little list here of talking points that I'm going to cover, so it's going to stretch a little bit longer than my usual videos. So I apologise to anybody if I bore you, but you can always come back and watch this later, or just listen to it as you're, I don't know, painting a miniature or something. Okay, so to begin with the beginning, a lot of people have difficulty coming up with interesting encounters at the very start of the game, particularly if you're starting with low-level characters and you're looking at low-level creatures and things like that, and you'll probably want to fall back on something like you go underneath the dungeon and you encounter some firebugs, or there's some sort of creature in a midden pit somewhere or something like that, and you send the adventurers in. They're hired to take care of some giant rats or something like that. And it's perfectly fine to use animals, not monsters, at the beginning of a campaign, and also to include animals all the time. As they're traveling through the wilderness and things, that they will come across bears and mountain lions and cheetahs and all sorts of creatures. Of course, cheetahs aren't going to give them any problem, but they might carry off their supplies, or harry their pack animals, or just be a nuisance. And also the pelts of animals and things are quite valuable. So if they can kill a hyena or something like that, the spotted hide of a hyena, or a lion's pelt or something like that, is actually quite valuable an item, particularly if they know how to cure it. So always a valuable thing, including the wildlife of the area around them, not just monsters and things, because it gives the impression that they're going through a wild area, a wilderness, and that they're in an untouched, lush world, unspoiled by modern society and things, and it gives us that release and that wondrous, epic sort of feeling of walking through an untouched world where anything could happen. Yeah. So, low-level creatures, animals, and humanoids. Now, be careful with humanoids because you want to have little bands of goblins or brigands or something like that. That's not going to overpower them with numbers. That's the strength of humanoids. And if you look through the monster manual, you'll notice that most of the humanoids have got a fairly low level in regards to like their difficulty rating. That's because they're designed to be used in groups. Because that's what humanoids do. They generally cohabitate in groups. So that's the danger, that you can get flanked at any time. You can get surrounded by them that are attacking you from all sides. It's very hard to take one out at a time, particularly if they're moving around a lot. It's hard to concentrate your fire on one at a time to reduce their overall numbers, and it's those return volleys of attacks that can really devastate a player party, particularly at low levels. So be careful about overpowering with numbers at any stage, including using swarms. Swarms are also very dangerous this way. Oozes, on the other hand, your adventurers have got a mobility advantage against oozes and things, and oozes are particularly exotic and scary for townsfolk, so use oozes at low levels of the game as well, because those things are really quite a lot of fun. Particularly if you throw weird abilities at them from the oozes that they weren't expecting, like say a corrosive mist, or there was one particular one which many people know about of mine, which is the delicious ooze, which sprays a pheromone on them that makes them smell delicious to other creatures, and increases their chances of random attacks from other creatures as they camp. So other things to avoid: cakewalk encounters, where basically the party is definitely going to completely overpower anything they're facing. So if they're facing a wormling one-on-one, and it's a full group of adventurers. They're going to wipe out a wormling unless the wormling's got some really clever sort of escape tactics, or it can hit and fade, or use allies or terrain to its advantage, and just avoid silly shit in general like that, where a wormling wouldn't find itself in that sort of situation because it's an intelligent-ish creature. Yeah, and that goes with humanoids and things like that too. They're going to run away from an adventuring party if half of their number get killed in the first round. They're going to run for it. They'd be crazy not to. Same thing with most things. They will surrender or try to negotiate. They will throw their valuables on the ground and back away. That's what adventuring parties should do as well. If they're in danger of getting wiped out, they should surrender, and always give them that option, particularly at low levels, and make it sort of a habit not to kill party members at low levels, but subdue them, knock them cold. If you can knock out the entire party, you can have really cool situations where they wake up in an enemy monster's camp. Lairs are also a great sort of thing to start off your adventures with, particularly if you're building up the environment that the players are basing their adventures in. Their characters are in, say, you're starting in some sort of civilization or a small community, or even a crew on a ship or something, but you'll have other NPCs around these guys who are training them, or hired them for some reason, or they're checking them out to see whether they're any good, challenging them maybe. They could be members of City Guard to start off with, or they could be recently kicked out of guilds or something, or an odd bunch that have been thrown together for some reason. And have it known that rumors will abound of creatures that are in the area. People will know about these creatures, particularly lairs and things, because lairs are areas where the creature is based, and it will be hunting around those places, and so people who live in the area will know well enough to avoid those areas. And big stories will start to grow up around them about, old farmer blogs, lost 3 sheep, or his fish mutated or something because of the weird creature, the fell creature, which is in these lairs. So build up that reputation for the creatures, and if the players are smart enough to have their characters ask around, they will learn additional details about the creature that will help them fight it. And in this regard, you can give them extra advantages, which means that when it comes time to actually attack this creature, you can throw something harder at them, particularly if they've got an advantage against it because they know one of its weaknesses. Certainly bump up its difficulty against them. So trophies of monsters, if they come back into town and they've got the trophy of the head or the pelt or the teeth or something like that, they've taken a pack animal and they've actually taken the entire creature back with them, particularly if it's a large one like a bear or something like that. Taverns and local lords will pay handsomely for a rich trophy, such as some sort of unusual creature. Sages and things will want to study it because they don't get a chance to get anywhere near these things, possibly for their entire lifetime. So coming across an owlbear might be a really rare find, particularly in that area. If owlbears are more common, then there may be some sort of a trade in alchemical goods from its bones or marrow or teeth or whatever. Don't forget, Chinese medicine relies a lot on the body parts of exotic animals, and there's no reason why that's not the case in medieval worlds too, maybe even more so, particularly with creatures that are known to be mage-bred or magical or otherworldly. I mean, these creatures are actually magical, and just let your imagination run wild on what you can achieve with owlbear feathers or pixie dust or all that sort of stuff. So your encounters, when they actually do get down to it, make them tactical. Allow yourself to sit back for a while and think about how the encounter is going to play out. I mean, actually put yourself in the shoes of an adventuring party when you're designing these encounters, and think about what you like to see when you're in combat with something. Just unusual things, like things that strike you out of the ordinary, very memorable moments, like poison mists that move across the battlefield, using a D8 to determine random directions each round for flame that is licking across the ground, or fissures are opening, things like that, using terrain proactively in the game to make the combat more interesting. So using terrain, using monsters that know what the terrain does and move around. So, for instance, just drawing from popular culture, if you're in the fire swamp and you hear the characteristic tum 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 tum, you know that you need to step aside because the fire is going to burst out of the ground right where you are standing. Um, and also, if you hear that sound, then you can make a combat roll to grab the creature and hopefully throw it onto the square you're just in, and licks of flame will burst up around it and do it severe damage. That sort of thing makes combat really, really interesting. So do yourself a favor as a DM and read up on ways to use terrain or different types of terrain. Make yourself a list of things that you can just throw at the adventuring party. Use them at various stages in combat. So have combat develop so that things progress or get increasingly difficult during the combat. So if it drags on too long, it gets more and more exciting. Like, you know, the place is on fire and things, timbers and things are falling across the ground and making difficult terrain, or flaming pits or whatever. Or the ground is caving away, as say I don't know, a land shark or something is bursting up out of the ground, and it's created a cave in, which is actually a sinkhole down below them, unbeknown to them, is actually filling in, and the ground itself is subsiding and causing fissures and cave-ins that may result in a hefty drop, and also separate the party during combat because they're now at different elevations, and this creature may have no difficulty in swapping between the two. So it gives the creature a mobility advantage the further in the combat gets. So if you consider things like that, and also a creature that can move around a pillar, so the pillar provides total cover depending on where it is in relation to the party. So if it's circling around a pillar, it can be attacking, singling out the party members, and it makes it very difficult for them to form up a defensive line if the creature is tromping around behind them or can come from either direction. It's basically like somebody trying to chase somebody else around a table, depending on which way they go. And of course, the adventuring party won't know which way this creature is going to go at any one moment. Add multiple pillars, and it just increases the randomness of where this thing's going to pop out. Throw in something like a ranged attacker at a different elevation or behind a bunch of skirmishers or something. 4th edition D&D was fantastic for this, and it's one of the real strengths of 4th edition that included all these monster types. Much like, you know, that's one of the reasons why it got sort of lumped into being like an emulation of a game, a computer game. But I mean, that's where computer games really have a strength. They do have a systematic way of defining combat roles. So you have brutes, and you have artillery, and you have leaders, and you have creatures which are there to harry and hamper, skirmishers which run in and do a lot of damage but don't actually have the capability of taking a lot of damage themselves. That sort of thing. So when you get back to like humanoids, for instance, they can have all sorts of different roles, whereas monsters and animals maybe not so much unless they're different types of creatures. Um, so yeah, a bunch of orcs and things will have guys who are in the background and they're throwing nets, bottles of flaming fluids or toxic stuff which is burning you as you run around. Yeah, just all sorts of random stuff that they use. Um, so yeah, like particularly orcs and things like that, they're raiders, and so they're going to favour being skirmishers that run in and do brutal large amounts of damage, so stormtroopers sort of things. But even in, like, if you think of Lord of the Rings, they have trained cave trolls, and not only that, but they've trained up some of them to be berserkers. So this relatively stupid creature, which by itself is just a thug that moves around and goes for easy targets of opportunity to get food and stuff, but put them in the hands of something like a bunch of hobgoblins, for instance, very militant hobgoblins. The hobgoblins are really smart, and they're incredibly militant. So they will use squad tactics and things like that that make them devastating. Have you ever seen some riot police trained up in the ancient Roman arts of moving around infantry troops and phalanxes and things like that with riot gear? They are incredibly intimidating, and I would not like to go up against them myself. That's for sure, because they can move their phalanxes around to split up groups of opponents and single them out. And it's very easy for 20 people to overwhelm somebody when they've been split off from another group. And they use those squads of troops to form living walls and shield walls and things that split off their opponents and single them out, and while also protecting their back ranks and things, so that they can move around quickly behind a protective shield wall, and protect themselves against, thrown objects or people who are rushing forward and things like that. So relatively puny, your average riot policeman, but when you put 20 of them together and they're moving around tactically, when they've trained to do that, they become devastating. Throw in something really exotic, like somebody who's mastered the ability to blow a whistle that will summon oozes and cause them to travel in different directions depending on the tone that they whistle, and that's something that is just going to blow your players' minds when they visualize this creature in the background, which is making whistling sounds. And when they start, when they figure out that if it plays a D sharp, the creatures are going to move in a southwesterly direction. Yeah, they're going to look out for that for sure. And that's one way of including puzzle solving in an actual tactical encounter, where they don't have time to sit down and figure it out. But if you have, I don't know, maybe a xylophone on the table next to you, and you're making a particular sound every time the creature moves in one direction or the other, if they can figure it out, yeah, more credit to them. They'll know exactly what's going to happen. But it's pretty difficult, and it's an interesting puzzle to solve on the fly. So yeah, I think that'll do for edition 1 of my my little tips and tricks for encounters with monsters. Yeah, so just a summary. At low level, don't be afraid to use animals for encounters. There's all sorts of animals listed at the back of the monster manual. I'm not going to go over them in detail, but yeah, certainly use them. And watch the History Channel for once in life. Watch nature documentaries and things, and figure out how pythons and packs of hunting dogs and things like that can harry your adventurers. Be careful of using a large number of humanoids and use them wisely, particularly when you're using phalanx attacks, having them move around smart in squads, because humanoids are dominant species for a reason. Oozes make really good low-level encounter creatures, and they're just generally fun to play with all the time and come up with new variations. Try to avoid situations where you easily overwhelm a single creature, because there's just your party is really quite deadly. Avoid cakewalk encounters where they just come in and kill stuff and get very low rewards for it, because it's just boring and not memorable, wastes time. And avoid silly shit where creatures just do stupid things for no reason, or they just don't make sense, like encountering an iron golem in the church or something with no real reason behind it. Or yeah, you've seen all of the situations that are crazy and should be avoided. Lairs, make it well known in the area that lairs and things exist, and build up that anticipation and allow the adventurers, the players, the opportunity for their adventurers to learn extra facts and things like that by interacting with the townsfolk, and therefore you can open up avenues for subplots and other side adventures, or lead-ins to the main adventure itself. Trophies are treasure, so let characters take trophies of animals, pelts and hides, and alchemical items and things from body parts. Encourage them to use pack animals and things, because pack animals are cool. They're just cool. They really are, using pack animals and things. And you find people who use pack animals get quite attached to them, and they give them names and they train them and things like that. Particularly if a particular donkey is quite a character and does things on its own every now and then, or even saves somebody's life, that can be really huge. Let encounters be tactical. Use your brain. Really think about it. Use all sorts of different tactics and terrain, features that develop during combat, and puzzles and things that they can solve on the fly. Yeah, hope that's helpful to you. If you enjoy this sort of video, please let me know in the comments down below. Give me a like. And if you haven't subscribed already, what's keeping you?